Welcome to the Mowgli Memories podcast. Today's guest is Baird Standish, who was at Mowgli in the 1970s. So I'll have to ask him what year he graduated and what year he came, of course. But that's standard fare here in the land of the School of the Open. So my name is Wayne King, and I am the host, erstwhile host, whatever, of the Mowgli Memories podcast. And we try to bring you this podcast on a regular basis, but it is a labor of love, and we don't solicit advertising for it, although there would be a number of folks interested, as they've expressed to us, especially people who sell camping gear and things like that. But we want to keep them without advertising. The only thing I'd ask you is if you have a free moment to go to the special Mowgli art gallery on my website, waynedking.com. And if you find something that you really like, we will be happy to have you purchase that, and half of the price will go to Mowgli directly as a donation in your name. The other half will help defray the expenses of the podcast, including hosting and production work. So, without further ado, here's my interview with Baird Standish.
Hey, Wayne.
And there he is.
We are.
Happy to see that you are still a musician at heart.
in art and in real life too. Yeah, I have a gig tomorrow night. Actually, I'm not exactly sweating bullets about, but it's whatever.
I just finished watching while I'm working on my own art, I often will pick something on YouTube to watch, and just watched a documentary about Woodstock, and that was so cool to watch.
Yeah. Wow.
When they interviewed the guy Yasgur who rented them the farm,
it
was so great, the stuff that he said.
Yeah.
Especially when when he was criticized for making this opportunity available to a bunch of hippies, and he said, most of these people are against the war, but he said there's a whole lot of kids fighting over there so that they can say so.
Yeah. No, I mean, he was a very courageous guy. I mean, just think about that. If I don't know, he was probably in his 70s at that point. Maybe he was a little younger. I'm not sure, and just decided to just throw in with these characters and do it. And he wasn't part of that culture or anything. Just
right. Yeah. There were a couple of guys. I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you were at Mowgli at the same time as Harry Kendall, but Harry Kendall and Nat Hemingway,
right?
They arranged to have a day off together, and they were going to hitchhike up to Woodstock.
Oh wow! Did they have to do it? They didn't do it though.
They didn't make it because they got about halfway there, and the roads were already packed with
I bet. Yeah.
So they turned around and went to Hampton Beach instead.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. Harry. I remember Judd Kendall. I don't know about him.
Yep. So. Well, Harry was his younger brother.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I play in a band, and I'm actually at the age of 66. I'm the youngest guy in the band, I think. And a bunch of these guys in the band were at Woodstock. It's funny, like one guy got there on Friday night, and he was there until about 9 o'clock the next morning, and he just said, "That's it, I'm out of here." Like it's raining, there's no food, there's nowhere to go to the bathroom. I can't get close to the stage. I mean, this is terrible. So anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it was an experience we all missed, but
Yeah.
it shaped a lot of what we do today.
Yep. That's right. Well, that's true. Yeah. In fact, I went out to lunch with this guy. So we're going to London on Friday, and the guy has a flat over there that he's allowing us to use. And he grew up in Princeton, and one of his good friends from Princeton was this guy John Roberts, who was the guy that was the financier
Oh
of
yeah, yeah.
Woodstock. Yeah, so.
Ah, wow.
And the guy was, I mean, I think in the beginning he lost some money, but apparently his father was pretty astute, and they had a bunch of lawyers, so they just wrapped up anything with the name Woodstock. They wrapped up into some kind of a copyright or some kind of a thing,
Right.
so nobody could use that name on any kind of music, anything, without paying him first.
Right,
So
right. And that triple album was apparently one of the best sellers of all time.
yeah, and it made I know that all those bands, I mean, it made those bands. But the thing was, some of it was a little bogus because they actually re-recorded a bunch of the stuff on
Yeah.
that record in the studio.
Right, right. Well, one of the things that shocked me was that John Sebastian played, but he wasn't scheduled to play.
Oh yeah,
They just needed him to fill in the time
right.
because they were having so much trouble ferrying bands in and out, and some were canceling or not showing up, and so Sebastian gets to go on and play himself into history.
Yep. And no, it was pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing time. I mean, I have to say, I went to Bethel Woods, or I went to it, a couple of years ago. They, have a museum there and all this kind of stuff, and it's pretty interesting, But the thing is, it's everybody says a lot of great stuff about it, but if you actually listen to some people that went there, it wasn't so great. I mean, it was really a kind of traumatic.
Yeah, 3 days of rain and mud, and
Yeah, right. Yeah. And you couldn't get out of there. You couldn't get your car back. So
right.
anyway,
but despite that, to have that many people peacefully assemble,
yeah,
uh, you know,
I know. Yeah,
extraordinary thing.
yeah,
Well, I'm speaking with my old friend Baird Standish. I haven't seen him in years, and it's so terrific to hang out for a bit here with you, Baird.
yep.
I know you have a long and storied history in terms of your family with Mowgli, but why don't you share that with folks? Because
My family. Okay. So, well, first of all, when I was at camp, my brother and I and my first cousin Steve Minich, we were all campers there at the same time. Steve and I were both in the same, we were the same age, and then my brother was 2 years younger. But and then my son Will was at Mowgli, and he was also a counselor. That was more recently. But then going back to the old days, our great uncle, Graham and mine and Steve's great uncle, Matthew Baird, the third, was there, and I believe graduated from Mowgli in 1916. So, and then he was one of the guys that either he did it or he was one of the guys that helped create the chapel in the woods. And the story about that was that there are these, I guess you would call them keystones or some kind of stones that are there's a kind of a bell tower kind of a thing there.
The arch, yep.
Yeah. And then after he graduated, he went on to Princeton, and then he went on to become a Rhodes Scholar, and he came back, and then he became a headmaster of a school out in Arizona. And he had a storied past. He did that, and then he was recruited into the Air Force, and he was out in the South Pacific in the Second World War, and then he joined the OSS and then the CIA, and he became their first director of training for the CIA, and then retired in 1965. And I I actually have all these letters from all of these guys, like, Helms and all the directors, and
Wow.
photos of all these guys. It's pretty cool. So anyway, so going back to the story about the chapel, I guess he had these rocks, these that he had found out in the desert somewhere in Arizona, and he took them out to New Hampshire, and they were put into that bell tower there, and they're still there.
And I believe into the altar as well. I remember
Into the altar, yeah.
Hart standing in front of the altar and actually pointing out
the
stones that he had given. And I hope that there's a record of that, because it's it's an important touchstone.
Yep.
For Mowgli.
Yep, definitely, yeah.
So you were kind of raised with the expectation that you'd be a Mowgli man, huh?
I think there was a push, in that direction, yeah. And I mean, among other things, and I know my mother's stepfather also went to Mowgli, and there were some other people, that went there, at other times too. And then on my other side of my family, my stepmother's brother went there. So anyway, and that was back in the 50s sometime. So anyway, so there were a lot of family members that
So
passed.
what year did you come, and what dorm were you?
So I came in 1969. I was in Aquila, and then so I graduated in 1971.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Huh. Right. 69 was my den year. So
yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So 2 years. Yeah.
So what do you remember from your years in Aquila and Panther before Den?
Well, let me think. I will say I actually wrote out a little list here of a few things that I thought were kind of special. And one of the things I'll say that I just thought was great, because I was thinking about this the other night. We were talking about short stories and horror stories with some friends of mine, and I remembered that Charlie Walbridge, he had this book of spooky stories, and he would light up his Coleman lantern, which was really cool because it had this kind of whooshing sound. He would
right
kind of this kind of aura, and we'd all be in bed, and then he would read us these stories. And I remember the one story that he read, and it was called Smee, and it was this story about they were in this kind of a big house. And I remember one of the deals about the house was that if you opened a door, you thought there were stairs that went down to the basement, but actually there weren't. You just dropped off. And why that was part of it, I don't know. But in any event, the deal was that they were all guests of this house, and the idea was that you had to go looking around for the other guests, and then if you passed by them, they would whisper "Smee." They would hide with them. But the story was that somebody had died in this house. So anyway, the guy who was the person who was, was writing the story, I guess the first person, was sneaking around the house, and he heard Smee and went and hid with this person, thought that he had maybe won the game or something. And then all of a sudden he heard, "Okay, everybody out now. It's all over." And he said, "Well, no, I'm hiding with the person." He goes, No, you're not hiding with anybody. You're just, hiding by yourself in the corner." And it, the implication was that he was hiding with the ghost of whoever was, Anyway, that was a spooky story in the middle, in the dark, and then I remember there was a werewolf story too. I can't remember exactly how that went, but it was kind of creepy. Anyway, they were great. They were great stories. So
and here you were in the dorm that was the farthest away from any other dorm, sitting
That's right.
Wood.
That's right. In the dark. Yeah. And
I know that there have been several people who have told me stories about living in Aquila and having a counselor who would tell them the story of the Mad Axeman, and then at night would go out and start chopping away at a tree to panic kids.
I remember that. I remember some counselors did that when we were out on some overnight. Actually, that was
Yeah,
yeah,
like Belle Island or right.
yeah, right, yeah. Yeah,
No
there's
way,
some good
no way
stories.
to escape.
Yeah, yeah. But I'll tell you another thing that I thought. I was just thinking about peculiar things, but here's another one that was pretty funny. And I think this is when I was in Aquila that I joined the model rocketry club. And I think Bob Howe was into it, and there were some other kids that were into this model rocketry thing. I don't know if you know about model rockets, but you would Estes made them, and they were just like cardboard tubes with a little point on one end and fins made of balsa wood, and you had these like engines you stick in there, and you put a fuse in there, and you light them up, and they fly away, right? But the
Right.
problem with model rocketry in New Hampshire is they go up and you're in the trees. So the chances you're ever going to see this thing again after you spend a lot of money, fixing this thing up and painting it up and all that were slim to none. So
Right.
yeah.
Uh, that's
Yeah.
funny. Yeah, I remember Bob Howe being into that,
Yeah.
and you and there was a pretty active group of kids that
Yeah.
to do it. But you're right, 9 times out of 10, that rocket was lost.
Yep. That's
Or
right.
it's probably still sitting in the top of those big tall pines.
That's right. Yeah.
Uh, so, do you remember any of your trips from that year from Aquila?
Yeah. I remember in when I was in Panther, the one trip that I remember the best because it was the most interesting, I should say. It was the trip to Greeley Pond, and I remember that it rained all night, rained all day, and I remember we climbed halfway up the slope of Osceola, and it just started raining, like couldn't even believe it. And we had our ponchos on, but we were all stuck on the side of this mountain forever while the rain just pummeled us on the side of this mountain. And yeah, I'll never forget that. There's nowhere to go. You couldn't get out of the rain either because
Right.
you're on the side of a mountain, right? So there are no trees up there.
I remember Greeley Pond. The thing that I remember most about Greeley Pond was that I'd never, there's a lot of clean and beautiful lakes and ponds in New Hampshire, but this one, when you stood beside it, it just seemed pristine
Yep.
until you went into it. And then not only was it freezing cold, but it was full of leeches.
Leeches, right. I know. They got on you. I know. And there was some trick about pouring salt on them or something that would get them off, I guess. But
Right.
anyway.
Did you
Yeah.
do Nancy Brook in Aquila? Was that a thing? Going to Nancy Brook?
I remember Nancy Brook. I don't remember much about it, but I do remember going there. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was this beautiful gorge on the Saco River
Yeah.
that was wonderful swimming. And
Yeah.
it gets me back to the fact that I wish there was an organization that was trying to preserve old swimming holes, because so many great old swimming holes are no longer open to the public because of people's fears about liability.
Yeah.
And that's one of them. You can't. I mean, you can swim there. I've been there in the last 2 years, but the only way to get there is if you go up the river and then walk down basically in the middle of the river until you get there, because by law the entire river up to the high water mark is public land.
Wow.
So you can still swim there, but to get there is very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Another trip that I remember that, and again, this was along the same lines of the Osceola one. I was going for my red ribbon, I remember, and Charlie took us on a trip to the Androscoggin River. We were going to run the rapids, And I remember that we were in a boat in a canoe, and I was in the bow or the stern. I can't remember. And Rick Bankston was, I think he was in the bow. Anyway, we went down and we hit a rock and we both went in the drink. And I would tell you what, I bounced on every rock in that creek. And I remember Charlie standing up on a rock with a rope, and he threw the rope out to me and dragged me out of the river. And I guess Rick too. Anyway, wow.
Yeah. Well, being introduced to whitewater by Charlie Walbridge was not only an experience, but you felt pretty secure. I mean, the guy was, he was a legend, but he was very safety conscious.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, he's the greatest. Yeah.
Although there were more than a few canoes that did not make it back to camp in the same shape that they left in.
Yeah, those Grumman canoes can take a few dents. There's no doubt about that.
So I can remember a few that got wrapped around rocks over the years.
Yeah.
Did you do the Mahoosics in Panther?
I don't remember the Mahoosics. I don't think we did. Yeah.
And what about ribbons? What were you working on? What did you?
Well, so I had a lot of ribbons. I made it to the inner circle after Panther. So I don't remember how many I had, but I can tell you what I think I had. I had a golden anchor. I had red ribbon. I had the I had the orange ribbon. That was a camping one, right? Yeah, I had the axemanship one. Yep. Yeah, and then I had the camping one.
Yeah,
and then I had the hiking one where you get for hiking enough miles.
Right.
And what else? Is there another one in there? I don't know. Anyway, there are a bunch of them, but yeah.
Were you Gray Brother, or I mean, it sounds like you had a lot.
I wasn't Gray Brother, I don't think, but I don't know who was Gray Brother, but but I did have a lot. I
weren't that competitive.
I don't know. I
did what you enjoyed.
Yeah, I did what I like to do, yeah. And then and then we were on this racing crew, and at that point, I don't even, it's still true, we had this sort of record-breaking blue crew, which was great. And my Uncle Matt would be rolling in his grave because he was red crew, so anyway.
Well, you still, as I recall, you guys still, were you on the same crew as Steve?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
you guys still hold the course record as far as
wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a lot of years ago.
Yeah. Well, I will say that it was perfect weather, and I remember when they started us out. I think Phil Hart had the gun, and the way it went was, all right, when I count to 3, you're going to go 1, 2, 3, bang, and it was just like that, and it was just like a jolt, and I just remember that first, that first surge was, pretty astounding. So,
yeah. What position did you row? Do you remember?
I was a number 4. I remember. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So you were in. They call that. At least I've been told that they call that the power position.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I had big legs.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you guys won, obviously. Was that the only year you rode racing crew, or did you?
Yeah, I was first form, I guess, the year before that. Yeah. Yeah.
And what about squads?
I was on Mount Washington squad.
Nice.
I was in Den, and I wasn't on anything else before that. So
yeah. What do you remember about the Mount Washington?
Well, first of all, we only had 5 of us, and it was a small group. And I love staying in those the hostels or whatever, or the hostels, I guess they are. I never had that experience before that.
Right. Do you remember who the staff were on that trip?
I think Charlie Walbridge was on it, and who I have to think about that. I'd have to go back and look at the. I
Yeah.
have to go back and look. I can't tell. I can't remember.
Let's
Yeah.
see, what that would have been your den year, which
That would have
was
been 71. Yeah.
71.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll bet you it was Andy Poppinchock. He might have been trip master then, but or it could have been Jim Boycourt.
Or no, or it could have been I don't
Yeah.
God, I can't remember.
Well, it would have been the trip master from that year because the trip master always goes on the Mount Washington squad, and then the director sort of gives some staff member the honor.
Or maybe Gaius Merwin, maybe.
Oh, could be.
I think that's who it was, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He was a big dude, Gaius.
Yeah, yeah, right.
You know, it's funny, Gaius, he either liked you or didn't like you, you know, and he really wasn't shy about letting you know. He called,
Oh yeah.
you were either a bud or a chuck. And if you were a bud, he liked you. And the chucks, well, you know, they needed to work on it. But I can remember Charlie and Gaius were the staff on my Mount Washington squad in 60. And I remember stopping on numerous occasions so that Gaius could wring out his T-shirt into a cup and measure the amount that he had sweated out during the interlude.
That's
it was
funny.
pretty gross.
That's pretty gross.
But you enjoyed staying in the huts.
Oh yeah, that was great. Yeah, and then the year after that, I went on a bicycle trip to British Columbia, and we stayed at the huts, up there, which is
Wow,
really great. Yeah. So. Yeah.
So you didn't come back as a staff, or you?
Did not. No. Actually, the couple of years after, I went to British Columbia on a bike trip, and then the year after that, I went to England and France on a bike trip.
Wow.
And then I just got involved with other things. But
British Columbia, I mean, British Columbia is beautiful.
Yeah, we started in Banff. We took a train out there, went from Banff to Jasper, and then took a train to Vancouver Island or Vancouver, and then went over the Vancouver Island and went up and down a little bit. Yep. Yeah, it was great.
That's interesting because I did almost the same trip. I'm trying to think what year it would have been, maybe 74, 75 or something. Took sea and Canadian Pacific.
Yeah.
Across the country.
Yeah.
And the first stop of any consequence was Banff and Lake Louise.
Right.
Were you petrified about grizzlies?
I wasn't, and I will say that when we were in Banff, we saw a lot of black bears, and they were like dogs. They would just come down to people's camps and kind of act cute, and people would feed them and stuff like that. And I never heard of anything bad going on. But I will say, this is maybe 20 years ago. My cousins and I went out to the Bob Marshall Wilderness in Montana, and my sister-in-law sent me this book because she grew up for part of her life in Montana. She sent me this book called Bear Attack, and I read it. I shouldn't have read it. And all I thought was, I don't want to run into a grizzly. But guess what? The very first day we were in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, you're not allowed to have any kind of a vehicle with wheels. So you could have to, drive or walk, or I'm sorry, take a horse or walk. And the very first day we were going along a path, and we looked up into a clear cut, like one of those moraines, and there was a big golden grizzly just standing up on a rock up there looking at us.
Huh.
They're around. There's no doubt about that.
Oh yeah. I remember when I went in, I don't know if this was true with you, but in order to go into Glacier, we had to this was a few years later, but we had to do basically a half a day seminar on etiquette in grizzly country.
Oh my God.
And nowadays they've got all these sprays and stuff that
Yeah.
way. But back in those days, the best you could do was a bell on your shoe.
Yeah. Like the dinner bell.
Yeah, yeah, that warned
Right.
the grizzlies you were coming and hope that they got out of the way.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
funny, I did that trip with a friend of mine from college, Chris Polydorf, and one of the funniest things about it was that every night, after we had cooked, we cooked in a completely separate location from where we camped.
Uh-huh.
And we took off all the clothes that we had cooked in and we hung them up in the tree and just
Hmm.
put on, clean, not smelly clothes and
Hmm.
went down. And we used to, the two of us would stand 180 degrees apart outside the tent, and then we would pee around the tent.
Like market.
Circular motion that would keep the grizzlies away.
Rocks a rock.
Yeah, we didn't have any problem with grizzlies, but I don't know whether that had anything to do with it.
Yeah. Pretty funny.
Yeah, but gosh, Vancouver, British Columbia is just a gorgeous place.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's really beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, what did you do after that?
After in the summers, or
what was the trajectory of your life after that?
Oh well, in short succession, I went to college, went to Yale, and we got a philosophy degree, and then I went to work out in Pittsburgh for Cushman and Wakefield, and I worked there for about 7 years, and then I went back to graduate school, went to MIT, and got a degree, and they have a program in real estate and development and that sort of thing, and that was in the late 80s, and came to Philadelphia, and I went to work for a big development company here. And then from there, I went into the mortgage finance business, and I spent 7 or 8 years financing shopping centers and apartment buildings. And I wound up opening an office here for Fanova Realty Capital, and the whole credit company was a $12 billion credit company, went up in smoke. And from there, I started a company. We got back into the contracting business, and what we do, and we've had this company now since 2003, so it's 20 years old. And we do, for lack of a better word, we do decorative surface restoration, or things like we do concrete polishing, and we restore marble and decorative floors and stones. And we also do statuary and anything that's involves natural stone or concrete, or those kind of things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's a far cry from philosophy, isn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
I interviewed a Mowgli guy whose name you might recognize, Dan Dennett.
Yeah, I was going through the history of Mowgli this afternoon, and I ran across that name because I remember that name from when I was a philosophy major, and I don't remember anything I actually read by the guy or anything, but yeah, that's
well, he's right. I mean, he in the hierarchy of living philosophers, Dan is right up there in the top.
Yeah.
So if you get a chance to go back and listen to that podcast, you might find it pretty interesting. I mean,
Oh, I will. Oh, that'd be
Colonel
great.
Elwell was the guy who told him he needed to be a philosopher.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very funny.
That goes with the Mowgli spirit, head in the clouds, feet on the ground, right?
Yeah, there you go. I like that. Yeah. How did you get it? I mean, were you always interested in music? How did you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I started playing the guitar when I was about 10. So, that was in 1967. And I've just been playing since then. But, I actually took it pretty seriously, and I learned how to do like Travis picking, as sort of a kind of thing they do out in Chet Atkins kind of a thing, or and I spend a fair amount of time figuring out flat picking, bluegrass flat picking, and then And then I kind of transitioned into doing gypsy jazz stuff. I got involved with some people that were into that, and I was in a band for 15 years. We did all the Django Reinhardt stuff, and I learned all these solos, and that was really great. And then all these people moved away, so now I just kind of do a lot of things that involve any number of those things. I kind of sort of a mishmash of instrumentals and songs, and I do them different ways. And yeah, I guess it's just my thing.
Well, you go on to YouTube and there's quite a few YouTube videos of you playing with one band or another.
Right. Yeah. My current band is actually, it's sort of a kind of rootsy folk rock kind of a thing. And we're still around and we're still doing, little concerts here and there. And, but yeah, if you go to my YouTube channel, I think I have something like 65 different, music videos of myself and these other guys doing different things. So,
Well, I'll make sure to lead people to your YouTube channel.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
So, all right. So, from a philosophical point of view, let's get back to philosophy.
All right.
How has your experience at Mowgli influenced the person that you became, Baird Standish?
That's interesting. I will say this. I've thought about this. And it's a little bit like what they kind of teach you at MIT too, which is that nothing is impossible. You can learn how to do anything. If you can show up and swing an axe or get in a canoe and go down a rapid and, come out, more or less in one piece at the other end and that sort of thing. If you can do that, you can do anything.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that, it's not like a success thing or anything. It's not like, we're trying to achieve anything. It's just, but this is my life. This is, just trying new things and, being interested in how things work and, not being put off by a challenge, that sort of thing. So,
right.
Yeah.
You've always had the confidence to take on new challenges and to build that fire in the rain.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Well, what a pleasure to talk with you, Baird. Yeah. Was there any other story that you wanted to convey? Did you end up on Mr. Hart's porch?
I don't know about that.
I don't remember that. So
I know about that. Yeah.
I won't say that you were a well-behaved boy, but I'll say that you never got caught.
No, right? Yeah, I will say that, though, just one more. It's not a story; it's just a memory, and this is sort of a funny story because my son had the exact same memory, which is we would go up to Mount Cardigan, and one of the things that they would have us do is pick blueberries, up on the side of the hill there. So we would pick blueberries, but there weren't that many blueberries, and when we would get back to camp, and then of course they would tell us that the overriding ethos is what's you share and share alike, which means that you have to share all the blueberries with everybody, right? So the next morning we would have blueberry pancakes. We're getting these pancakes and there'd be like one blueberry in there,
After all your work.
After all my work, yeah. Right.
Well, I was there for a good part of one of the summers when Will was there. So I hope you'll tell him I said hello and warn him that his time is coming.
I will. I'm going to tell him that. Yep.
So
conditioning. That's right.
Baird, it was great talking with you. Good hunting, friend.
Thanks, Wayne. Same here.
Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.